My name is Sophia Brooks. I'm 35 and I never thought I'd have to fight my own parents to protect what my grandmother built. When Evelyn passed, she left me her Vermont home and a carefully built investment portfolio. At a family meeting, my parents casually announced they'd sell it all to bail out my brother Mason's gambling debts. They didn't know I'd already moved everything into a trust they couldn't touch. Their faces when I told them unforgettable. Before I share how I stood my ground, let me know where you're watching from in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more true stories about standing up to family manipulation. It was a Thursday afternoon when I got the text. No explanation, no details, just Mom's usual clipped tone. Family meeting. Sunday 3 p.m. Important. I stood in my office in downtown Austin, phone in hand, watching the message glow on the screen. The sun was dipping low, turning the glass buildings into sheets of gold, but inside me a cold dread settled in my stomach. Important in my family usually meant Mason needed something. It meant I needed to pay for it. I took a slow breath, rubbing my thumb along the edge of my phone. My grandmother Evelyn had died a year ago, leaving me with a portfolio of investments, her Vermont home, and jewelry that had been in our family for generations. She always said the inheritance wasn't just money, it was responsibility. I wasn't about to let them take that away from me. I stepped out of my office and dialed Zoe, my best friend since college and my business partner. She picked up on the second ring. "Hey, what's up?" I could hear the sound of her keyboard tapping in the background, the soft hum of the office printer. "I just got a text from my mom. Family meeting on Sunday." There was a pause, then a sigh. "Let me guess. Mason." I pressed my lips together. "Probably. He's been off the radar for weeks." "Did you hear?" Zoe's voice dropped, almost a whisper. "Someone saw him at the casinos in Vegas last week. And not the penny slots." I felt my pulse quicken. "Please tell me you're kidding." "I wish I was. Word is he's tied up with some Russian loan sharks." I closed my eyes, pressing the bridge of my nose. Images of Mason flashed in my mind, his messy hair, the way he'd laugh off every mistake, the constant excuses. "You think this meeting is about him again?" I asked, even though I already knew the answer. "When has it ever not been about Mason?" Zoe replied softly. I walked to the window, looking down at the traffic crawling through Congress Avenue. People with coffees in hand rushing to catch buses, living lives without the constant pull of family chaos. "My grandmother didn't leave me that inheritance so I could save him," I whispered. Zoe was silent for a moment, then spoke. "Sophia, you know you don't owe them this." I swallowed hard. "Yeah. But you know how they are." There was a knock on my office door. One of our junior associates poked her head in to remind me of a client call. I nodded, giving her a small wave, then turned back to the window. "I have to go," I said. "Call me after," Zoe replied. "Whatever happens, you're not alone." After I hung up, I stood there for a moment, letting the reality sink in. Sunday was coming, and with it the battle I had spent my whole life trying to avoid. That evening I sat on my couch with a glass of water, flipping through the old leather folder where I kept Evelyn's documents. Her will, the property deeds, the investment statements. Her handwriting on the margins neat and careful, reminding me of the afternoons we spent together learning how to balance accounts and read financial reports. "Money is a tool, Sophia," she would say. "Not a leash." I promised her I would protect what she built. I promised her I would protect myself. When my phone buzzed again, I jumped. It was a message from Zoe. "Call me if you need me. I'll be here." I glanced around my quiet apartment, the place I had built for myself, the life I had fought to protect from the chaos Mason always brought. I wasn't sure I could keep him from dragging me down again. But I knew I was going to try. And I knew I wasn't signing over my life this time. The next morning I woke before the sun, unable to shake the heaviness in my chest. I made coffee, standing at my kitchen island, the smell of dark roast filling the quiet room. My phone lay on the counter, screen dark, but I could feel its weight. I knew I had to prepare. I opened my laptop and pulled up the scanned documents Evelyn had left me. The will notarized with my name written clearly. The deeds to the Vermont house, the investment portfolio she had carefully curated over decades. It wasn't about greed, it was about honoring what she built, what she taught me. I spent the next hour reviewing each line, highlighting the protective clauses she had insisted her attorney include. She knew my parents. She knew Mason. She knew they would try to take it. I pulled up the estate's online banking accounts, checking for any unusual activity. Everything looked clean, but something in me couldn't rest. That afternoon, I drove to my parents' house on the west side of Austin. The same brick house I grew up in, the one with the creaking porch swing and the fading blue shutters. Mom opened the door before I could knock. "Sophia, you're early." Her smile was tight, her eyes darting past me, scanning the driveway as if expecting someone else. "I wanted to talk," I said. She stepped aside, letting me in. The scent of her lavender candles mixed with something burning in the oven. She was always trying to make things feel normal, even when nothing was. Dad was in the living room, sitting in his recliner, flipping through a stack of papers. "Hey, Soph." His voice was casual, too casual. I sat on the edge of the couch, clutching my bag to my chest. "What's this meeting about, really?" I asked. Mom wiped her hands on a dish towel, her eyes avoiding mine. "Sweetheart, it's about the family." Dad looked up, pushing his glasses up the bridge of his nose. "Your brother is in trouble," he said. I closed my eyes for a moment, trying to keep my voice steady. "How much this time?" Mom flinched. Dad cleared his throat. "It's serious, Sophia." "He's gotten mixed up with some people who Russian loan sharks," I interrupted. They both froze. "Zoe told me," I said. "And before you even ask, the answer is no." Dad's jaw tightened. "It's not that simple." I stood pacing across the worn carpet. "You want me to give up what Evelyn left me? You want me to sell the Vermont house, drain the accounts to pay off Mason's debts?" Mom's voice trembled. "He's your brother. And Evelyn was your mother." I snapped, anger rising in my chest. The room went silent. Dad stood folding his papers, placing them carefully on the coffee table. "We're family, Sophia. We take care of each other." I stared at him, feeling the old wound reopen. The years of being the responsible one. The one who never needed help, the one who always cleaned up Mason's messes while they turned a blind eye. "I won't let you take this from me," I said quietly. Mom reached for my hand, tears in her eyes. "Please, Sophia. Mason's life could be at risk." I pulled my hand back. "I won't let him destroy everything Evelyn worked for." Dad's eyes darkened. "You think she wanted you to hoard it while your brother is in danger?" "I think she wanted me to protect it from exactly this," I replied. The front door opened and Mason walked in. His hair was messy, eyes bloodshot, wearing a wrinkled hoodie. He looked at me, then at Mom and Dad. "Is she giving us the money?" he asked. My heart cracked at the way he said us. "This isn't happening," I said. Mason's jaw tightened, and he stepped closer. "Come on, Sophia, don't be like this. You know what happens if I don't pay." I looked into his eyes, searching for the brother I used to know. "Get help, Mason. That's what you need." His face twisted into anger. "You think you're better than me, don't you?" "No," I whispered. "I just won't let you drag me down with you." Dad stepped between us, his voice low. "If you don't help your brother, Sophia, there will be consequences." I felt the room spin, their faces blurring, the walls closing in. "I need to go," I said, grabbing my bag. Mom called after me, her voice shaking. "Sophia, please." But I didn't look back. I walked out of the house, down the steps, past the porch swing that creaked in the wind. As I reached my car, I pulled out my phone, my fingers shaking. I dialed Zoe. "They're going to try to take everything, Zoe," I said, my voice breaking. On the other end, Zoe's voice was calm. "Then we'll be ready for them." I took a deep breath, gripping the steering wheel. Because I knew tomorrow everything would change. I thought it was just another family meeting, but they planned to make me the sacrifice to save Mason. I parked a block away from my parents' house, the July heat pressing against my skin as I walked up the sidewalk. I didn't want them to see my car in the driveway. I didn't want them to know I was there. Mom had texted earlier that they were running to H-E-B to grab groceries for the meeting tomorrow. I checked the time. I had maybe an hour if I was lucky. My hand shook as I unlocked the front door with the key I still had. The smell of lemon cleaner and old wood greeted me, pulling me back to childhood memories I didn't have time to indulge. I moved quickly down the hall, past the family photos of Mason in his football jersey and me in my graduation cap. Past the reminders of who they thought deserved to be saved. Dad's office was exactly as I remembered. The heavy oak desk. The green banker's lamp. The file cabinet he thought no one knew how to open. I did. I dropped to my knees, pulling a thin piece of plastic from my pocket. A trick Evelyn had taught me when I was 16, helping her organize family papers. The lock clicked open. I flipped through the files looking for anything with my name or Mason's. That's when I found it. Family Asset Restructuring Plan. My stomach dropped as I opened the folder. There it was in black and white. Draft documents for a new family trust, naming Mom and Dad as trustees. Mason listed as beneficiary, needing urgent help. The words blurred as I read them again, forcing myself to keep breathing. Another stack of papers detailed the recommended asset liquidation plan. Selling the Vermont house, liquidating Evelyn's carefully managed investment account, selling her jewelry collection. The total circled at the bottom. Sue by Centurling. The exact number Zoe had warned me about, tied to Mason's gambling debts with Russian loan sharks. I pressed my hand to my mouth, fighting back the taste of bile. They were going to gut everything Evelyn had left me to pay for Mason's mistakes. And they hadn't even planned to ask. They were planning to tell. A rustle in the hallway made me freeze. I listened, breath held, but the house stayed quiet. I forced myself to keep going. I found emails printed and stapled together. My father had been emailing a lawyer named Robert Klein, someone I had never heard of, asking how they could legally compel me to sign over my inheritance for family needs. Robert's reply was highlighted. Your best argument will be family unity and urgency. Use emotional leverage. I snapped a photo of the email with my phone, then the trust drafts, the liquidation plans, every single page. My hands were shaking so hard I almost dropped my phone, but I kept going. Evelyn's face flashed in my mind. Her sharp blue eyes, her steady voice telling me, money is power, Sophia, but only if you protect it. I closed the file, slid it back into place, and locked the cabinet. I stood swallowing hard, listening for any sound. Still nothing. Just the steady hum of the AC, the quiet tick of the wall clock. I walked out of Dad's office, down the hall, past Mason's photos, past the smiling family portraits that now felt like a lie. I stepped out the front door, locking it behind me, the Texas sun blinding as I walked back to my car. I sat in the driver's seat, my breath coming in sharp, shallow pulls. I opened my phone, pulled up Diana Roberts' contact, and typed, I need to set up an irrevocable trust. Now. I hit send, watching the message disappear, feeling the weight of what I was about to start. Diana called me back before I even pulled out of the neighborhood. Sophia, are you safe? Her voice was calm but clipped, the voice of someone who handled emergencies for breakfast. Yes, but I found the documents. They're planning to liquidate everything. A pause. Do you have proof? I took photos of everything. Emails, draft trust documents, plans to sell the Vermont house. Good. We need to move fast. I drove back to my condo in Austin, my eyes checking the rearview mirror every few blocks. I didn't know why, but I felt like Mason might be watching, or worse, someone he owed money to. When I got home, I kicked off my heels, grabbed a glass of water, and paced while I waited for Diana's video call. The sunset washed the living room in gold, but I barely saw it. My phone buzzed. Hi, Sophia. Diana said, her dark hair pulled into a tight bun, glasses perched on her nose. First, I'm glad you're safe. Second, we need to get your assets into an irrevocable trust immediately. Can we do that without the final probate? I asked, my voice shaking. Your grandmother's estate is in final stages, right? Yes, Calvin said the distributions will be released in weeks. Perfect. We can structure the trust to receive the assets upon distribution, and you can assign your current ownership rights into the trust now. It will protect everything. I nodded, trying to breathe. Do you want me to handle all communications with Calvin? She asked. Yes, please. I can't trust my parents not to pressure him. Diana looked me straight in the eye. This will get messy, Sophia. Your parents will be furious. They're already planning to steal everything, I said, my voice low. Then let's protect what's yours. We ended the call and I forwarded her the photos, my hands steady now with purpose. The photos of the documents, the highlighted emails, Mason's name in bold under beneficiary, needing urgent help. I opened a bottle of ginger ale, taking a long sip, remembering how Evelyn would sip the same drink while balancing her checkbook, teaching me about compound interest when I was 12. A ping sounded. Diana had sent over the first draft of the trust paperwork. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Zoe. "You okay?" she asked without preamble. "No, but I'm handling it." "What did you find?" "They're planning to sell the Vermont house, liquidate everything to pay off Mason's gambling debts." "Holy hell, Sophia. I'm setting up an irrevocable trust." Evelyn didn't fight for this family's future, so Mason could blow it all in Vegas. Zoe was quiet for a moment, then said, "You're doing the right thing." "Do you want me there when you tell them?" "I don't know how I'm going to tell them yet." "You'll figure it out," she said. "Call me if you need backup." After we hung up, I signed the preliminary trust documents digitally, my finger hovering over the signature line before pressing down. Sophia Brooks. For the first time in days, I felt a thread of calm. A sense of control. I sat back on my couch clutching my phone, the city lights of Austin blinking through my windows. Then my phone vibrated again. This time it was a text from Mom. "Hi honey. Just checking in. Don't forget about the meeting tomorrow. 3 p.m. We love you." I stared at the message, bile rising in my throat. Love. The word felt like a trap now. I typed back one word. "Okay." Then I turned off my phone, closed my eyes, and took a deep breath, letting the cool air fill my lungs. Because tomorrow, I would walk into that family meeting with a secret they couldn't touch. And they had no idea what was coming. They thought they could corner me into signing everything away, but I had a plan they couldn't break. Diana met me at her downtown office before sunrise, coffee steaming between us, as she spread documents across the marble table. "You'll be the grantor and the sole beneficiary," she said, tapping each page. "No one else can legally access or control these assets." I stared at the papers, Evelyn's voice echoing in my head. "Family legacy isn't just money, it's responsibility." "What happens if they try to contest this?" I asked. Diana's eyes didn't waver. "They can file claims, but they will lose. It will cost them time and money, but the trust will hold." She paused, lowering her voice. "But Sophia, they will threaten you. They may try to shame you publicly, say you're betraying your family, manipulate every weakness they know you have." I swallowed, my hands flat on the table. "I'm ready." "Good," Diana said, sliding a pen toward me. "Then let's protect what's yours." Signing the documents felt like drawing a line between who I used to be and who I needed to become. Each signature was a promise to Evelyn and to myself that I would not fold. As we wrapped up, Diana said, "You need to keep this quiet until the last piece is moved. If they know too early, they can sabotage your plan." I nodded, feeling the weight settle on my shoulders. I left Diana's office and drove straight to Calvin's historic building, the attorney who had managed Evelyn's estate for decades. His office smelled like leather and dust, comforting in a strange way. "Calvin, I need to finalize probate immediately," I said, before I even sat down. He lifted an eyebrow. "This is sudden, Sophia. My parents are planning to liquidate everything. I need the distributions released as soon as legally possible." Calvin folded his hands, thinking. "Evelyn would have approved of you taking charge," he finally said. "I will expedite what I can, but it will require your active coordination. Whatever it takes." The next 48 hours blurred into a race. I coordinated with Calvin to push paperwork through the county clerk's office. I called the bank requesting new accounts under the trust's name for the investment portfolio. They tried to ask questions, but I kept my answers clipped and legal. At the same time, I prepared the transfer documents for the Vermont property. The historic house where I had spent childhood summers under Evelyn's watchful gaze, where I learned to balance a checkbook at 13 and plant vegetables in the garden. I called Zoe while I waited in the parking lot outside the title company. "Please tell me you're okay," she said. "I'm moving the investments into the trust today," I said, watching the Austin skyline blur through the windshield. "Just be careful," Sophia, Zoe warned. "If your parents get wind of this, they will try to stop you." "I know. Do you have a backup plan if they corner you?" "I have Diana," I said, "and I have the law on my side." "But you know them, Soph. They don't play fair." Her words sank deep, but I forced myself to breathe. "I can't let them steal Evelyn's legacy to cover Mason's debts." "I know," Zoe said softly. "Call me after you're done." I ended the call stepping out of the car, documents in hand, determination stealing every step I took toward the title office. If they wanted a fight, they would get one. And I was ready. I walked out of the title office, the transfer papers for the Vermont property locked in my bag, my pulse pounding like I'd just run a marathon. The sun was setting over Austin, painting the sky in streaks of orange and purple, but I barely saw it. All I could think about was what would happen if my parents found out before everything was done. I drove straight to the bank, checking the rearview mirror like I was being followed, though I knew it was just paranoia. But I couldn't risk slipping up now, not when I was so close. The banker, a young woman named Jenna, smiled politely as I handed over the documents. "I need to transfer these investments under the name of my irrevocable trust," I said, keeping my voice steady. She glanced at the paperwork, then looked up. "We can handle this today, but it may take a few hours to process." "That's fine," I replied. "I'll wait." As I sat in the small waiting area, I scrolled through my phone, checking emails, pretending to look calm while my knee bounced uncontrollably. A text came in from Zoe. "Everything okay?" I typed back quickly. "At the bank now. Almost done." Her reply was instant. "Stay strong, Soph." I closed my eyes, leaning back in the chair. Memories of Evelyn's voice drifted through my mind, reminding me that family legacy was about strength, not sacrifice. Jenna returned, handing me a stack of documents to sign. Each signature felt like a protective shield snapping into place around everything Evelyn had worked for. "Congratulations," Jenna said softly. "It's all under your trust now." I nodded, swallowing hard. "Thank you." Leaving the bank, I finally allowed myself a small breath of relief. The investments and the Vermont house were secure. The jewelry would be next, but that would require a quiet visit to the safety deposit box before the meeting. As I pulled into my condo's parking spot, my phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't Zoe. It was my mother. "Sophia, we need to talk. Now. What did you do with Evelyn's accounts?" My stomach dropped, the air in the car suddenly too thick to breathe. "They knew." I stared at the message, my fingers frozen above the screen. My heart was pounding so loud I could hear it echoing in my head. They must have noticed the account changes, or someone at the bank let it slip. Maybe Mason had overheard something, or they were watching closer than I thought. I closed my eyes, feeling a wave of fear crash through me, but it didn't last long. Because under that fear was something stronger. Resolve. I opened my eyes, my reflection in the rearview mirror looking back at me. I didn't see the daughter they could guilt and control anymore. I saw the woman Evelyn raised. I took a deep breath, opened the message, and began typing. But before I could send it, my phone lit up with a call from my father. I let it ring, gripping the wheel, letting it buzz until it stopped. Then it rang again. And again. I silenced it, my hands trembling as I got out of the car, each step toward my condo heavy but certain. They were going to come for me. And I was ready for them. I unlocked my condo door, stepping inside to the quiet hum of the fridge and the soft ticking of the clock on the wall. I set my bag down, pulling out the folder with the trust papers, and placed it carefully in the small safe hidden in my bedroom closet. My hands shook as I entered the code, feeling the weight of what I had just done pressing on my chest. A knock sounded on my door, sharp, insistent. My phone buzzed in my pocket again. Another call from my father, followed by a text. "Sophia, answer us. We know you did something." I backed away from the door, staring at it as if it might burst open. My mind raced, wondering if they would really come here tonight, demanding explanations. I forced myself to breathe. In, out, in, out. Another knock. I grabbed my phone and texted Zoe. "They're calling. They know." Her response was immediate. "Don't open the door if they show up. Call me if you need backup." I swallowed, typing back. "Thanks." The knocking stopped, but my phone rang again. This time I answered, pressing it to my ear but saying nothing. "Sophia, it's your father." His voice came calm but with an edge that made my spine stiffen. "We need to talk about what you're doing." I stayed silent, letting him fill the space. "Your mother is worried sick," he continued. "We heard from the bank that there have been changes to Evelyn's accounts. You're moving things without discussing it with us." My jaw tightened. "I'm fulfilling what Grandma Evelyn wanted," I said, finally, my voice clear. There was a pause and then a low laugh that sent chills down my arms. Sophia, you don't understand the situation. We're family. Family decisions are made together. Like selling off everything she worked for to cover Mason's debts. I shot back, heat rising in my chest. That's not your concern, he snapped before catching himself. You don't know the full story. I know enough, I replied, moving to stand by the window looking out at the lights of Austin, the city that had become my shield. He sighed heavily. Sophia, you're making this harder than it needs to be. You're isolating yourself. I clenched my jaw. I'm protecting what Grandma left me to protect. You're being selfish, he said, his voice rising. Your brother is in danger, and you're hoarding family resources out of spite. I closed my eyes, letting the words hit but refusing to let them sink in. I'm not discussing this over the phone, I said, and hung up. My hands were shaking as I set the phone down. I felt the tears prick my eyes, but I blinked them back, refusing to let them fall. This was the price of standing firm. My phone buzzed again, this time with a text from Mason. Hey Soph, can we talk? It's not what you think. I stared at it, anger and sadness battling inside me. The brother who had drained our parents, who had ignored Evelyn's teachings, who had gambled away his future and now wanted mine too. I typed back, not now. I dropped the phone on the couch and walked to the kitchen, grabbing a glass of water, forcing myself to drink. Each swallow felt like it was clearing the fog of guilt and fear from my mind. My phone rang again, and for a moment I considered throwing it across the room, but I picked it up instead. It was Zoe. Are you okay? She asked, her voice steady, grounding me. I don't know, I whispered, sliding down to sit on the kitchen floor, my back against the cabinets. They know. They're angry. They'll be angrier when they find out it's done and they can't touch it, she said. I let out a small, bitter laugh. That's what I'm afraid of. You're doing the right thing, she said firmly. Evelyn trusted you for a reason. Don't let them bully you into doubting that. I know, I said, wiping at my eyes with the back of my hand. But it's hard. I'll come over, she said. You shouldn't be alone. No, I said quickly. They might show up. I don't want you in the middle. She sighed. Call me if they do. I will, I promised. After we hung up, I stood and walked to the safe, placing my hand on it as if I could draw strength from the cold metal. I whispered softly, I've got this, Grandma. My phone buzzed again, another message from my mother. Sophia, we are coming over. We need to talk tonight. I stood there, the glow of the screen lighting up my shaking hands. They were coming. I took a deep breath and set the phone down. Let them come. The day I walked into that family meeting carrying a folder instead of a soft heart, everything changed forever. I pulled into the driveway of my parents' old craftsman home on the edge of Austin, the oak trees heavy with morning mist. My fingers drummed on the steering wheel, my pulse matching the rhythm. I could see Mason's beat-up Ford parked crooked near the curb, its window cracked as if it couldn't roll up fully anymore. I grabbed my leather bag from the passenger seat, feeling the weight of the documents inside. The irrevocable trust paperwork was neatly clipped, the ink dry and final. I paused, looking at my reflection in the rearview mirror. My brown eyes looked tired, but there was steel there too, Evelyn's steel. I stepped out, boots crunching on the gravel, and walked up the brick path I had walked 1,000 times before. But today, I wasn't coming home. I was coming to end the cycle. The door opened before I could knock. My mother stood there in her pale blue sweater, her hair pinned perfectly, but her eyes were puffy. She tried to smile, but it fell quickly. Sophia, we're glad you're here, she said, softly stepping aside. I walked in, the familiar scent of cinnamon and coffee hitting me, but it didn't comfort me. It felt like a trap. In the living room, Mason was slouched on the couch, his elbows on his knees, twisting a baseball cap in his hands. His dark hair was unwashed, and he wouldn't meet my eyes. Dad stood near the fireplace wearing his gray suit, even though it was Sunday, his hands clasped behind his back like he was preparing to deliver a verdict. Sit down, Sophia, Dad said, his voice calm but tight. I chose the armchair near the window, my bag on my lap, my hands steady on the leather. There was silence, heavy, before Dad cleared his throat. Family has always been the most important thing in this house, he began, looking down at the rug, then at me. And sometimes family needs to make sacrifices for each other. Mom sat down next to Mason, placing a trembling hand on his back. He flinched but didn't pull away. Mason is in trouble, Sophia, Dad continued. You know that. I didn't answer. I just looked at him, letting the silence speak for me. Your brother owes people who will hurt him. Mom said, her voice cracking. We have to help him, Sophia. We can't let him. Can't let him, what I asked, my voice even. Face the consequences of his choices. Mom's eyes filled with tears. Mason looked up at me, then his eyes red, his face pale. Soph, I know I messed up, he said, his voice shaking. I didn't mean for it to get this bad. I was going to pay it back, but these guys, they're not the kind of people you can ignore. I felt a pang, but I held it back. I had spent my whole life feeling pangs for Mason, covering for him, helping him. We've spoken to an attorney, Dad said, pulling a folder from the coffee table and holding it out toward me. This is a plan to put everything into a family trust. Your mother and I will manage it. We'll sell what needs to be sold, settle Mason's debts, and then rebuild together. Mom sniffled, reaching for a tissue. It's what your grandmother would have wanted, Dad added. I almost laughed, but I didn't. Evelyn would have wanted me to stand exactly where I was now. I didn't take the folder. I kept my hands on my bag, my knuckles white. Dad's eyes narrowed slightly. Sophia, you need to sign this. Today. Mason looked at me, tears in his eyes. Please, Soph. They said they'd come after me. I don't want to die. I inhaled deeply, the air sharp in my lungs, as I slowly reached down to unzip my bag. I pulled out the folder, letting the leather slide against my palms. The room was so quiet I could hear the ticking of the old clock above the fireplace, each second loud, heavy. Dad's eyes flickered to the folder, then back to my face. His jaw tightened. What's that? He asked. I opened the folder slowly, pulling out the top document. The seal from Diana's office was visible, the notary's stamp fresh and clear. I held it up, letting the silence stretch as they realized this wasn't the paperwork they were expecting me to sign. This, I said, my voice calm, is the confirmation that all of Grandma Evelyn's assets have been transferred into an irrevocable trust. Mom's mouth fell open, her tissue dropping to the carpet. Mason blinked like he didn't understand the words, his face pale, lips parting as if to speak, but no sound came. Dad's face turned red, a vein pulsing near his temple. He stepped forward, his hand outstretched. Sophia, give me that paper. I pulled it back, sliding it carefully into the folder. Number. Do you have any idea what you've done? Dad's voice was low, controlled, the way it always was before he lost his temper. Yes, I said, meeting his glare. I've protected Grandma's legacy. I've protected myself. Mason stood up, his hands shaking. Soph, you can't do this. You can't let them, these people, they'll kill me. I turned to him, my heart twisting at the fear in his eyes, but I kept my voice steady. And you think risking everything Grandma built, everything she entrusted to me, will fix that? She would have wanted us to help him. Mom sobbed, her voice high, desperate. We're family. She wanted us to honor her work, her wishes, her sacrifices. I shot back. You're asking me to destroy everything she built because Mason can't stop gambling. Dad slammed his hand on the coffee table, making the folder jump. You're being selfish. No, I said, standing up, my knees steady. For the first time, I'm not. Mason's face twisted, anger flashing across his features. They're going to break my legs, Sophia. Or worse. You think your precious trust fund is worth that? You think this is about money, I said softly. But it's about boundaries. It's about stopping the cycle. You're choosing money over your brother's life. Dad shouted, his voice booming through the room. I'm choosing to stop enabling him. I replied, my voice calm even as my hands shook. Mom collapsed back onto the couch, her face in her hands, sobs racking her shoulders. You always thought you were better than us, Mason spat, stepping closer, his face inches from mine. Little Miss Perfect with her degrees and her big career. I didn't flinch. I looked him in the eyes, seeing the fear, the desperation, but also the entitlement that had been there our whole lives. I'm not better, I whispered. I'm just done. Dad took a deep breath, trying to steady himself, but I saw the rage simmering beneath the surface. You're going to regret this, Sophia. I shook my head. Number, one day, you'll thank me. I turned to leave, the folder clutched against my chest, my pulse loud in my ears. As I reached the door, Mason's voice cracked behind me. Sophia, please, he choked out, his voice breaking. I don't want to die. I paused, my hand on the doorknob, my eyes burning. I turned back, looking at him, at Mom, at Dad, the family I had tried so hard to hold together for so long. You need help, Mason, I said, my voice shaking. But this isn't it. I opened the door, the cold air rushing in as I stepped out. Behind me, the living room was silent except for Mom's quiet sobs. As I closed the door, I heard Dad's voice, low, dark, full of fury. This isn't over. I stepped off the porch, the winter wind sharp against my face, my breath clouding in the air. And I knew he was right. It wasn't over. No one at that table expected me to fight back, and the moment I did, everything broke. Dad's face turned red, and he slammed his hand on the table so hard the silverware rattled. You have no idea what you've done, Sophia, he shouted. Mom's hands were shaking as she wiped tears from her cheeks, her eyes pleading. Honey, please, you don't understand how serious this is. Your brother's life is on the line. Mason leaned forward, his eyes, wild sweat beading on his forehead. Soph, please, they're going to kill me. You don't get it. They don't care about the police or lawyers. I clenched my jaw, gripping the edge of the table, trying to steady the tremor in my hands. I understand, Mason. But you can't keep doing this, and you can't expect me to sacrifice everything Grandma built because you refuse to get help. You're selfish, Dad snapped, pointing a finger at me. You're heartless. We raised you better than this. I laughed, but it was a dry, empty sound. You raised me to clean up everyone else's messes while pretending everything was fine. Mom sobbed harder, her shoulders shaking, her voice small. Sophia, we're family. Family means we help each other even when it's hard. Helping each other doesn't mean destroying each other, I said, my voice rising. It doesn't mean sacrificing my future, my security, and everything Grandma worked for to cover Mason's debts. Mason's chair scraped loudly as he stood pacing behind Mom, running his hands through his hair. They're going to kill me, Soph. Do you want that on your conscience? My eyes burned, but I held my ground. I want you to get help. I want you to stop gambling and hiding behind excuses. Mason spun toward me, tears in his eyes, rage in his voice. You don't get it. You think you're so perfect with your fancy job and your lectures about responsibility. I'm not perfect, I said, my voice dropping. But I'm done letting you drag me down with you. Dad stepped closer, his voice low and threatening. We can take you to court. We can sue you for your share. For the emotional damage you've caused. I looked at him, exhaustion and sadness washing over me. Go ahead. Sue me. But you'll lose. Grandma's attorney, the probate court, the trust laws, they're all on my side. You think the law will protect you from your family, Dad hissed. I think the law will protect me from being manipulated by my family, I shot back. Mom's face crumpled as she dropped her head into her hands, crying loudly now, her body shaking with each sob. Mason punched the wall, leaving a dent in the plaster, his breath coming in ragged gasps. You just signed my death sentence, Sophia. The words sliced through the room, leaving a cold, empty silence. I took a shaky breath, forcing myself to look at each of them. I won't apologize for protecting what Grandma wanted. For protecting myself. Dad's jaw tightened, his eyes cold. You're no daughter of mine. The words hurt more than I expected, but I kept my face still. That's your choice, Dad. Mason grabbed his jacket and stormed out, slamming the door so hard the windows rattled. Mom tried to reach for me, but I stepped back, her tears dripping onto the floor. Please, Sophia, she whispered. I shook my head. I love you, Mom. But I can't do this anymore. I turned and walked toward the door, my legs heavy, my heart pounding each step, feeling like it might break me. As I stepped outside, the cold air hit my face, and I closed my eyes, breathing deeply, trying to steady the shaking in my chest. Behind me, the house was filled with the sound of my mother's sobs and my father's anger. But for the first time, I felt free. The drive back to my apartment felt like a blur, the cold wind cutting through my coat as I walked up the steps. I shut the door behind me, leaning against it, letting the silence swallow me. My phone was buzzing, nonstop calls from Mom, from Dad, even from an unknown number I knew had to be Mason. I tossed it on the couch and walked into the kitchen, hands trembling as I filled a glass with water. I could still hear Mason's voice in my head, begging, accusing, threatening. You just signed my death sentence, Sophia. The words echoed in the quiet of my apartment, mixing with the sound of my heartbeat thudding in my ears. I sat down at the kitchen table staring at the glass, watching the water ripple as my hand shook. My phone buzzed again and I grabbed it without thinking, ready to shut it off. It was a text from Mason. "You just killed me. They will come for me now." I dropped the phone, the screen going dark as it hit the table. My breath caught, and for a moment I felt the fear claw at my throat. I picked it up, rereading his message, my thumb hovering over the call button, but I didn't call him. Instead, I texted back. "Get help, Mason. This ends now." 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. He didn't reply. I stood up, pacing the kitchen, my mind racing. Would they really come after him? How deep was he into this? How far would these people go? I grabbed my phone and called Zoe, my voice low and shaking. "Hey, it's me. Are you okay?" she asked immediately. "No," I whispered. "Mason just texted. He says they'll kill him." There was a pause, then Zoe's calm voice. "Sophia, you did the right thing. This isn't on you." "It feels like it is," I said, sinking into the chair again. "Sophia, listen to me," Zoe said, her voice firm. "You can't save him by sacrificing everything. He needs help, and if he's in danger, he needs to call the police." "You know he won't," I said, my voice breaking. "Then you need to protect yourself," Zoe said. "You can't fix him, Sophia." I closed my eyes, pressing my fingers against my temples. "I know," I said softly. We stayed on the phone for a while, Zoe's voice grounding me, reminding me why I had done this. After we hung up, I walked to the window, looking out over the city lights, the cold glass against my forehead. I thought of Grandma Evelyn, of her voice telling me, "Protect what matters." My phone buzzed again, another message from Mason. "Meet me. Please. I need your help." I stared at the message, my fingers cold, the room suddenly too quiet. I knew I couldn't ignore it. I typed back, my heart pounding. "Where?" The dots appeared again, then a reply. "Behind the diner on 5th. Tonight." I looked at the clock. 10:37 p.m. The streetlights glowed outside, the world moving on while mine felt like it was collapsing. I grabbed my coat, slipping my phone into my pocket, locking the door behind me. As I walked down the hallway, the weight of what I was about to face pressed heavy on my shoulders. I had protected the inheritance. I had protected Grandma's legacy. Now I had to protect my brother from himself. Even if it meant walking straight into the dark to do it. I thought signing the papers would end the war, but it was just the opening shot. That morning I drove across Austin to a small repair shop with a faded sign, "Thomas's Auto and Supply." Thomas, my dad's younger brother, stepped out, wiping his hands on a rag. He was in his early 60s, gray hair, the same sharp blue eyes as Dad, but softer somehow. "Sophia," he said, surprised, "I didn't think I'd ever see you here." "I need to talk," I said, my voice low. He nodded, waving me into his cramped office, the smell of motor oil and old coffee filling the air. I sat across from him, my hands wrapped around the coffee cup he handed me. "I know you were cut off from the family," I began, "but I need the truth." Thomas sighed, leaning back in his chair. "Your dad and I stopped speaking when he started using family money to cover bad investments." "What kind of investments?" I asked. "Real estate deals gone bad, risky stocks, some half-baked business ventures," he said, rubbing his temples. My stomach dropped. "Grandma's jewelry," I whispered. "Did they sell it?" Thomas met my eyes, nodding. "They sold off pieces, quietly, told everyone it was to help Mason." Truth was, they were in deep before Mason ever started gambling. I felt the air leave my lungs, anger bubbling under my skin. "They were planning to use my inheritance to clean up their mess," I said, almost to myself. Thomas nodded again. "And Mason's debts made it convenient to guilt you into giving it up." My phone buzzed in my pocket, a new email notification. I pulled it out, my blood freezing as I read the subject line. "You're next if you don't pay." Thomas saw my face drain of color. "What is it?" he demanded. I handed him the phone. His jaw tightened as he read. "That's not an empty threat," he said quietly. "Whoever Mason owes, they know how to find you." I felt my hands start to shake. "Thomas, what do I do?" I whispered. He leaned forward, eyes steady. "You go to the police, Sophia. You don't play games with people like this." "I can't," I said, panic rising. "If I call the police, they'll go after Mason." Thomas sighed. "And if you don't, they'll come after you." I stood up, pacing the small office. My mind was spinning, the weight of everything pressing on my shoulders. My phone rang, Zoe's name on the screen. I answered immediately. Zoe. Sophia, I've been thinking, she said, her voice urgent. You need to leave Austin for a while. Get somewhere safe. I can't just leave, I protested. You can, she insisted. You have options. Go to Vermont, stay in the house. Let Diana handle the legal fallout while you stay alive. I closed my eyes, leaning against the wall. I'm scared, Zoe. I know, she said softly, but you're not alone in this. I hung up and turned back to Thomas. If I leave, they'll think I'm running, I said. Thomas looked at me with sad eyes. Sometimes staying alive is more important than proving a point. I looked down at my phone, the message still open. You're next if you don't pay. I swallowed hard, feeling the fear sink into my bones. But underneath it, a spark of something else, resolve. I drove home with my hands gripping the steering wheel so tight they hurt. Every red light felt like an invitation for someone to pull up beside me and finish what that email threatened. When I got back to my condo, I checked every lock twice, pulling the curtains shut before I even set my purse down. I stood in the kitchen, the hum of the refrigerator, the only sound trying to steady my breathing. I pulled out my phone and called Diana. Sophia, she answered on the first ring. I got a threat, I said, my voice shaking. They know who I am. There was a pause. Was it direct or anonymous? It was anonymous, but they said, you're next if you don't pay. Diana let out a slow breath. I'm calling a contact at APD, she said firmly. You need to file a report. I can't, I whispered. If the police get involved, Mason might get hurt. Diana's voice was calm, steady. If you don't protect yourself, Sophia, they will hurt you. Then Mason won't be the only victim. I closed my eyes, tears pricking, but I didn't let them fall. I don't want to live like this. You won't, she promised. We'll set up a protective order if needed. Forward me the email now. After we hung up, I forwarded the message, my fingers trembling. I paced, checking my phone every few seconds, expecting another threat. Instead, a text popped up from Zoe. You need to leave now. I called her immediately. I can't leave, I said again, hearing how tired I sounded. You can and you should, Zoe replied. Sophia, this isn't about just your safety anymore. This is about control. They want to scare you into giving them what they want. I rubbed my temples, looking around my apartment. What if they find me in Vermont? I whispered. Then you deal with it, then she said softly. But you can't fight this war in the open. Not while they're circling. I sank onto the couch, letting her words wash over me. She was right. Every email, every threat, every demand from my family had been about one thing. Control. I stood, walking to my bedroom, pulling out a suitcase. It felt surreal, folding clothes into a bag while my heart pounded like a drum. My phone buzzed again, and I nearly dropped it. It was Mason. Please, Sophia, please help me. I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over the reply button. I thought about the little boy he used to be, chasing fireflies in the backyard, his laughter ringing out under the Texas stars. Then I thought about the man he was now, the man who had gambled away everything and was dragging all of us down with him. I turned off my phone. I finished packing, zipping up the suitcase, and took one last look around the apartment. I was about to turn off the lights when I noticed headlights through the blinds. They didn't move. My breath caught. I edged closer to the window, carefully pulling down a slat with one finger. A black SUV idled across the street, its engine running, headlights glaring directly at my living room. My pulse roared in my ears. They had found me. I thought I knew what betrayal felt like, but nothing prepared me for hearing my own mother cry on the phone, begging me to give up everything for Mason. Please, Sophia, she sobbed, her voice cracking. They're going to hurt him if we don't pay. I stood in the kitchen of the small cabin I had rented outside Burlington, my hand gripping the counter so hard my knuckles turned white. Mason made his choices, Mom, I said, keeping my voice even. He's your brother, she screamed, the desperation slicing through the phone. Don't you care if he dies? I closed my eyes, trying to block out the image of Mason as a kid grinning as he handed me dandelions from the yard. Mom, I care, I whispered. But I can't let him drag us all under. There was silence, then the phone rustled before Mason's voice came on rough and shaking. "Sophia," he gasped. "They're going to kill me." I felt the words hit like a punch, but I kept breathing. "You have to help me, please," he said, his voice breaking. "If you don't, I'll just end it myself." A sharp pain sliced through my chest and I gripped the counter tighter. "Don't say that, Mason," I said, my voice trembling. "What else am I supposed to do?" he yelled, panic flooding his words. "I'm dead either way, Sophia." "Stop," I said, forcing my voice to steady. "You can get help, you can go to treatment." He laughed a bitter, broken sound. "With what money?" he snapped. "They want everything. They said they'll come for you next." I opened my eyes, staring at the sunlight filtering through the window, the leaves rustling in the breeze like nothing was wrong in the world. "Mason," I said softly, "you need to get clean. That's the only way this ends." "You think I can just walk into rehab and they'll leave me alone?" he shouted. "You think you're safe up there in Vermont?" Tears burned, but I refused to let them fall. "I'm not using Grandma's money for this," I said. "But I will help you get into treatment." He was silent, and for a moment I thought the call had dropped. Then he whispered, "You're going to let me die." "No," I said, my voice shaking. "I'm going to help you live." He hung up the silence in the cabin, pressing down so hard I could barely breathe. I stood there for a long time, the phone still in my hand, before I called Diana. "We need to meet," I said. "All of us." When Diana asked. "Tomorrow," I said, taking a breath. "At your office." I hung up and called my parents, who answered on the first ring. "We're meeting tomorrow at Diana's," I said. "Bring Mason." "What is this about?" my father demanded. "It's about boundaries," I said, and ended the call. The next morning, I walked into Diana's office, clutching a folder of documents against my chest like a shield. My parents were already there, sitting stiffly on the leather chairs, eyes puffy, faces drawn. Mason was slouched in the corner, hoodie up, hands trembling as he picked at the threads on his sleeves. Diana nodded to me, calm and professional, and gestured for me to sit. "Thank you for coming," she began, her voice steady. I didn't wait for her to continue. "I'm going to make this clear," I said, looking each of them in the eye. "I'm not using Grandma Evelyn's inheritance to pay off Mason's debts." My mother's face crumpled, tears spilling as she shook her head. "Sophia, please," she whispered. "He's your brother." "He's an addict," I said softly. "And the only way he survives is if we stop enabling him." Mason's head snapped up, his eyes red, his jaw clenched. "You're condemning me," he spat. "You're letting them kill me." "No," I replied, keeping my voice firm. "I'm offering you help, but it won't come from money that doesn't belong to me alone. It's a legacy that belongs to future generations, not a bandage for a gambling debt." My father stood abruptly, pointing a shaking finger at me. "You ungrateful child," he snapped. "We raised you. We gave you everything. And now you stand there with your fancy lawyer telling us you won't help your own brother. You're asking me to destroy everything Grandma built," I said, standing too. "You're asking me to betray her trust, and I won't." Mason's eyes filled with tears, and he looked so small in that moment. "I don't want to die," he whispered. My resolve wavered, but I forced myself to breathe. "That's why I've arranged a spot for you at Haven Recovery," I said. "I will pay for your treatment, Mason, but that's where it ends." He looked up, confusion and desperation warring on his face. "And after that?" he asked, voice cracking. "You will work with the counselors there," I said. "You will commit to recovery, or you will face the consequences of your choices." My mother sobbed, burying her face in her hands, while my father's shoulders sagged as if the fight had drained from him. Diana cleared her throat. "This is a fair boundary," she said. "Sophia is within her rights, and this is the healthiest path forward." Silence filled the room, thick and heavy, until Mason looked at me again. "Will you come with me?" he asked, his voice barely audible. "Yes," I said, my voice softening. "I'll take you there myself." Mason lowered his head, and for the first time in a long time I saw something that looked like surrender. Not defeat, but a fragile acceptance. We walked out of that office together, the weight of generations pressing on all of us. That evening, as I packed a small bag to drive Mason to Haven in the morning, my phone buzzed with a new email. It was from Mason. "Thank you, Sophia. I'm starting to understand." I sat down on the edge of my bed, the screen glowing in my hand, tears finally spilling as I whispered to the empty room. Please, Mason, mean it this time. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time I felt hope crack through the fear. Then my phone buzzed again with an unknown number and a chill ran down my spine as I answered. A voice on the other end said, "Sophia, you're not finished yet." I used to think Grandma Evelyn's greatest gift to me was the house in Vermont, but I was wrong. It was the quiet strength to sit alone in her old library and finally feel at peace. I drove up from Austin on a crisp October morning, the leaves glowing red and gold against the white porch railings. As I pulled into the gravel driveway, I cut the engine and let the silence of the place wrap around me. The house smelled the same, a mix of pine-old books and the faint lavender sachets Grandma tucked in every drawer. I carried my small bag inside my boots, echoing on the hardwood floors, passing the family portraits that once made me feel like an outsider. Now they felt like a reminder of how far I had come. I set my bag down in the library, the sun slanting through the window onto Grandma's old leather chair. On the table was the letter she had left for me, folded carefully under the glass lamp. My hands shook a little as I lifted it, sitting in the chair where she had read to me as a child. "My dearest Sophia," it began, her handwriting still strong. "If you're reading this, it means you stood firm even when it hurt." Tears blurred the ink as I read her words, reminding me that family is worth protecting, but only when they choose to protect themselves too. That money can build a home, but it cannot build a family. That courage sometimes means saying no even to the people you love most. I closed my eyes and let out a breath I didn't know I had been holding. Outside, a light breeze rustled the maple leaves. My phone buzzed, and I wiped my cheeks before answering. It was Mason. "Hey," he said, his voice steadier than it had been in years. "Hi, Maze," I replied, trying to keep my voice even. "I just wanted to tell you I got the job at the garden center," he said, a note of pride in his words. "I'm proud of you," I said, my voice catching. "I couldn't have done it without you," he replied softly. We sat in silence for a moment, the good kind, the kind where you don't need to fill the air with explanations. "I'm coming up this weekend," he said. "I'll make your favorite," I teased. "Grandma's chili." "Deal," he laughed, and for the first time it felt like we were just siblings again, not broken pieces trying to fix each other. As I ended the call, I looked around the room, seeing not just what Grandma had left behind, but what I was now able to build. The Vermont house was no longer a burden to protect. It was a promise I had kept. That weekend, the house came alive in a way it hadn't in years. Zoe arrived first, carrying bags of groceries and her favorite Vermont maple syrup. "You didn't think I'd let you celebrate alone, did you?" she said, grinning as she set everything on the kitchen counter. Thomas pulled up in his old pickup next, bringing a box of firewood and a bottle of wine. "Evelyn would have wanted a good fire tonight," he said, giving me a warm, uncle-like pat on the shoulder. Even Diana came just for the evening, bringing her quiet, calm presence and a fresh apple pie from a local bakery. We moved around the kitchen, chopping vegetables for the chili, laughing as Zoe dropped a carrot on the floor and Thomas scolded her like an older brother. It felt simple, warm, and real. Mason arrived last, a little shy, holding a small potted plant in his hands. "For the porch," he said, avoiding my eyes. "It's a new start, right?" I took it from him, hugging him before he could pull away. We ate dinner at the long wooden table, the one that had hosted decades of family meals under Grandma's watchful eye. But this time there was no tension, no hidden agendas, no fear, just the sound of spoons against bowls, laughter when Thomas tried to tell one of his bad jokes, and Mason quietly thanking me for the second bowl of chili. After dinner, we sat by the fireplace, the flames crackling, filling the room with a comforting glow. Mason sat across from me, his eyes clear, his shoulders relaxed in a way I hadn't seen since we were kids. "I know I can't change the past," he said, voice steady. "But I'm trying to build something better." I nodded, blinking back tears. "That's all any of us can do," I said. Thomas leaned back in his chair, watching the fire. "Your grandma would be proud, Sophia," he said softly. "She didn't just leave you this house, she left you the courage to keep this family honest." I looked around the room, seeing the people I loved not as burdens but as their flawed human selves, and for once it was enough. Later that night, after everyone had gone to bed or left for the drive back to town, I walked to the library carrying the small plant Mason had brought. I set it on the windowsill, the moonlight casting soft shadows across the floor. I opened the window, letting the cool Vermont air fill the room. The house creaked gently, settling around me, alive with the echoes of laughter and the promise of quieter, kinder days. I touched the edge of Grandma's chair, whispering into the silence. "I did it, Grandma. I kept your promise." A single leaf from Mason's plant brushed against my hand, and I smiled. Sometimes the real inheritance isn't money. It's the strength to protect what matters, to set boundaries, and to let go of the fear that you owe everyone everything. It's the freedom to build a life on your own terms. As I looked out at the dark Vermont hills, I felt a peace I hadn't felt in years. If you've ever had to stand up to your family to protect what's right, I'd love to hear your story. What would you have done if you were me? Have you ever been in a situation like this? Share in the comments. And if you want to hear more stories about family courage and standing your ground, don't forget to like and subscribe for more.